We saw a silhouette between the trees, but it was taller than the treeline. At first, I thought it was a trick of distance, some ridge or rock formation catching the last smear of dusk. But the shape moved. Slowly, deliberately. Its outline wavered like heat rising from asphalt, except the air around us was cold enough to sting the lungs. The forest had been quiet for hours, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels arranged rather than natural. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. We had been hiking deeper than we should have, following a trail that wasn't on any map. The path had appeared between two leaning cedars, narrow but unmistakably trodden, as though something large had passed through recently. The soil was disturbed in long, sweeping arcs, and the undergrowth was pressed flat in patterns that didn't match any animal we knew. My companion, Rhea, insisted it was just erosion. I didn't argue, but the forest felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. As the silhouette shifted again, the trees around it bent subtly, as if bowing. The canopy trembled without wind, leaves shivering in a synchronized ripple that traveled outward in a widening ring. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of wet bark and something metallic, like rusted iron. My ears popped, and for a moment, the forest seemed to hum, a low, resonant vibration that settled into my bones. Rhea whispered, "Do you see that?" I nodded, unable to speak. The silhouette leaned, or perhaps the forest leaned around it. Its proportions were impossible. A torso too long, limbs too thin, a head that tapered into a point like a spire. It wasn't a creature in the traditional sense. It was more like a distortion, a vertical smear of darkness that refused to blend with the night. We stepped backward, but the ground shifted beneath us. Roots rose subtly, rearranging themselves like slow-moving serpents. The path we had followed was gone, replaced by a tangle of undergrowth that hadn't been there minutes before. The forest was closing, funneling us, guiding us towards something unseen. The silhouette moved again. This time it bent downward, lowering itself between the trees. Branches snapped, not loudly, but with a soft, deliberate crack, as though the forest was making room. The shape's head dipped below the canopy, and for the first time, I saw something like an arm. Long jointed in too many places. It brushed the ground, and the soil recoiled, rippling outward in concentric circles. Rhea grabbed my sleeve. "We need to go." But the forest disagreed. The trees around us shifted, trunks subtly rotating, branches knitting together overhead. The light dimmed further, though the sun hadn't fully set. Shadows pooled unnaturally, stretching toward us like spilled ink. The air grew colder, and the metallic scent intensified until it stung the back of my throat. We moved anyway, pushing through the undergrowth. Every step felt wrong, as if the ground resisted our weight. The forest hummed again, louder this time, vibrating through the soles of our boots. My vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment, I saw double. Two forests overlapping, one real and one older, darker, more primal. The silhouette reappeared ahead of us, impossibly close. It hadn't walked. It had simply shifted, like a shadow cast by a moving flame. It towered above us, taller than any tree in sight, its form bending in ways that defied perspective. The air around it warped, bending light, distorting the trunks behind it into spirals. Rhea gasped, "It's watching us." I didn't know how she knew, but she was right. The silhouette had no eyes, no face, no features at all, yet its attention pressed against us like a physical force. My heartbeat synced with the forest's hum, each thud echoing through the ground. The trees leaned inward, forming a corridor that led directly to the towering shape. We stumbled backward, but the forest shifted again. The corridor closed behind us, branches knitting together like ribs. The only direction left was forward. The silhouette bent lower, its head descending until it hovered just above the forest floor. The ground beneath it darkened, as though its presence drained the color from the soil. A faint whisper rose, not from the creature, but from the trees themselves. Leaves rustled in patterns that resembled speech, though no language I recognized. The sound crawled along my spine, cold and intimate. Rhea clutched her head. It's inside my ears. The whisper grew louder, threading through the branches, weaving around us. The forest wasn't speaking to us, it was speaking about us, cataloging, measuring, remembering. The silhouette extended an arm or something like an arm toward us. The limb elongated, stretching far beyond what should have been possible, bending around trunks without touching them. It stopped inches from Ria's face. She froze, trembling, her breath shallow. The limb hovered, then retracted slowly, folding back into the silhouette's impossible geometry. The forest hummed again, softer now, almost satisfied. Then the silhouette rose, higher, higher still. Its form stretched upward until it merged with the canopy. Then beyond it, becoming a column of darkness that pierced the sky. The trees bowed, their branches lowering in reverence. The air thinned, and for a moment, I felt weightless, as though gravity itself had shifted. The silhouette pulsed once, an immense, silent heartbeat, and the forest responded. Roots twisted, soil churned, and the ground beneath us trembled. The whispering ceased abruptly, replaced by a deep, resonant silence. Then the silhouette vanished. Not by moving, not by fading. It simply ceased to be, as though it had never existed. The forest exhaled, branches rising, shadows retreating. The path behind us reappeared, clear and unmistakable. Ria collapsed to her knees, gasping. I pulled her up, and we stumbled along the newly restored trail. The forest no longer resisted our steps. If anything, it guided us gently, ushering us out like unwelcome guests who had overstayed. When we finally reached the edge of the woods, the sky was fully dark. Stars glittered overhead, indifferent and distant. The forest behind us stood silent, its tree-line unmoving. But as we turned to leave, I felt it. A faint vibration beneath the soil, a hum that echoed the silhouette's pulse. The forest remembered us. It had measured us, catalogued us, marked us. And somewhere deep within its ancient heart, the silhouette waited, taller than the tree-line, older than the soil, patient, watching. Something invisible walked through the woods, bending the moonlight around it. At first, I thought it was a trick of my eyes. Fatigue, maybe, or the way moonlight breaks when it passes through mist. But the distortion moved with intention. It slid between the trees like a pressure wave, the silver light curving subtly around an unseen mass, as if something enormous were displacing the night without ever revealing itself. The forest noticed it before I did. Leaves trembled in places where no wind reached. Shadows tightened, pulling inward. We were 6 miles from the nearest road, deeper than we'd planned to go. The forest here was old in the way ruins are old, layered, compressed, holding too many histories in too little space. The trees grew impossibly tall and close together, their trunks rising like pillars into a ceiling of branches so thick the stars were reduced to pinpricks. Sound behaved strangely beneath that canopy. Our footsteps arrived late. Our whispers seemed to brush past our ears rather than enter them. No one spoke after we saw the moonlight bend. We didn't need to. The silence felt instructed. As we walked, the woods adjusted itself around us. The ground softened in irregular patches, swallowing sound. Roots surfaced just beneath the soil, ridges that guided our steps without our consent. Somewhere to our left, something cracked, slow, deliberate, like weight being redistributed. I felt the sensation in my chest before I heard it, a dull pressure that suggested proximity rather than volume. We told ourselves stories to keep moving, rational ones, large animals, temperature inversion, optical illusion. The forest listened without comment. Then the smell arrived. It wasn't rot exactly. It was iron and sap and something mineral like stone freshly split. It clung to the back of my throat. The trees nearest the distortion darkened, their bark slickening as though dampened from within. Lichen peeled away in strips, falling soundlessly. The moonlight bent more sharply now, wrapping around an absence tall enough to brush the canopy, its outline suggested only by what it displaced. We stopped when the birds did. The forest had been noisy before. Not loud, but alive with insects and distant calls, that all shut down at once, as if a switch had been thrown. Even the wind seemed to stall. In the sudden quiet, I became acutely aware of my own body. The rasp of breath, the pulse in my ears, the faint tremor in my hands. Somewhere ahead of us, something invisible shifted its weight. A tree leaned, not fell, leaned, slowly, deliberately, bending away from the distortion as though avoiding contact. Its roots groaned, lifting partially free of the soil before settling again. Others followed, a subtle chain reaction rippling outward. The forest was making space. I realized then that whatever walked there wasn't pushing through the woods. The woods were parting for it. We backed away without discussing it, our movements careful, reverent. Every step felt like a test. When my heel snapped a twig, the sound landed wrong. Flattened, smeared, as though the forest had edited it. The distortion paused. Moonlight tightened, stretching thin over the unseen surface of something vast and vertical. Time slipped. I don't know how else to describe it. My watch still ticked, but moments stacked unevenly. A breath lasted too long. A blink ended too soon. The invisible presence advanced in increments that felt measured, as though distance were being recalculated around it. The ground beneath us cooled, leaching heat through our boots. We found the clearing by accident, or maybe it found us. The trees retreated just enough to form a circular break in the forest, bare earth packed smooth, marked with shallow depressions arranged in a spiral that never quite reached the center. Old ash clung to the soil despite no sign of recent fire. At the clearing's edge stood stones half swallowed by moss, their surfaces etched with grooves softened by time. No symbols I recognized, no language, just repetition. The distortion halted at the treeline. Moonlight bent violently now, outlining a massive curvature where nothing should have been. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a sense of being observed from multiple angles at once. The air thickened, resisting movement. When I tried to speak, my voice dissolved into breath. Then the forest reacted in earnest. Branches twisted toward the clearing, leaves turning their pale undersides outward like exposed skin. The ground vibrated, not shaking, but humming, a low-frequency resonance that traveled through bone. Somewhere below us, something answered back. The spiral depressions began to darken, filling with shadow deeper than night, shadow that moved against the light. I understood, then, what the stories meant when they said the forest remembered. The invisible thing stepped into the clearing. Moonlight wrapped around it in sheets, bending, stretching, breaking. For a heartbeat, the outline sharpened, not into a shape I could name, but into a geometry that made no sense at all. Too many verticals, angles that refused to meet, a presence that suggested height without width, mass without form. My mind recoiled from it, scrambling for metaphors that failed as soon as they formed. The pressure intensified. I tasted blood. Around the clearing, trees bowed low, their branches scraping the earth in a gesture that felt uncomfortably like deference. The stones vibrated, their grooves glowing faintly as if warmed from within. And then, impossibly, the thing leaned, not toward us, through us. For a fraction of a second, I felt myself stretched, thinned, as though my outline were being traced and measured. Memories surfaced unbidden. Childhood rooms, half-forgotten faces, dreams I'd never spoken aloud. The sensation wasn't violent. It was clinical, praising. I dropped something without realizing it. A coin, I think, or maybe a button. It struck the ground and vanished into shadow. Others followed suit, emptying pockets in a shared, instinctive act. The forest absorbed the offerings greedily, soil closing over them as if sealing records. The pressure eased. The invisible presence shifted, withdrawing from the clearing not by moving away, but by becoming less immediate. Moonlight relaxed, snapping back into familiar angles. Sound returned in fragments. An insect's chirr, the distant creak of settling wood. The trees straightened, slowly, reluctantly. We didn't wait. We left the clearing without running, our steps guided by a path that hadn't existed before and would not exist again. The forest allowed it. Behind us, the distortion slid back into the trees, moonlight bending softly around its passage, marking its route like a scar that closed as soon as it passed. When we reached the edge of the woods, dawn was already bleeding into the sky, though it felt like minutes had passed rather than hours. The road looked wrong, too flat, too open, but we crossed it anyway, not stopping until the forest was well behind us. Later, people asked what we'd seen. We never found the words. How do you describe something that never truly appeared? Something that bent the world without breaking it, that cataloged without touching, that was acknowledged by the forest like a sovereign returning home? Sometimes, on clear nights, I look up at the moon and swear I see it. Just for a moment, the light curving where it shouldn't. And I know the woods are still making space.